Hi everybody, and welcome to this Integr8tor 2020.08 release video. My name is Dirk Leroy and I am with UcamX Ghent in Belgium. What I would like to do in this video is give you a tour of some of the most important new features and enhancements that we have put into this August 2020 release. And to do so, we have this little presentation here, which is going to take us along a few of these highlights. Now, if we look at the overview table, what we see as the main highlights in this release is a UcamX Workflow Edition graphics editor. And alongside of it, almost in the usual tradition, I would say, a number of QED and auto-clean additions, so new features or additional possibilities in the whole workflow system that will add to your QED information or that will help you produce more optimum clean shop outputs to go into the CAM department, for instance. Just briefly going through in this video or in this presentation, as we said, we will look at the UcamX Workflow Edition graphics editor in action. From there, I will take you through a couple of QED reports to highlight some of the changes that we've made, some of the new features that we have added, rearrangements that have been done so that you won't be shocked first time that you see new style QED report. No, it's not as bad as that, trust me. So that's still QED. Then I will briefly talk about a number of things that we have been doing in the area of outline creation. Outlines, you know, are crucial to integrated jobs. We've done a number of things there. Same thing with drill span recognition. I will mention two new items, RegionMaker and PadMaker. We will be looking at some new possibilities of entering PCB characteristics, things like surface finishes or solder marks or blah, 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 in an automated way by means of the Gerber job file input. I have a few examples at hand to give you a feel for the zero size apertures and the aperture removal and what we do there, as well as for a new function to set origin. Now, this part here is basically stuff that goes down behind the scenes. It's things that are there in Integr8tor and that Integr8tor will do for you. Other than that, there is also a number of visual very visual things I would like to touch upon, which are a couple of extensions into, or a couple of extensions to our cockpit. Other than that, there is quite a list of code changes and fixes, not just fixes of issues that you have reported, but also code changes. And I would definitely like to flag one or two of them because they impact on the daily use of the system. So consider it as a sort of heads up, as in when you do the installation of the software, that you are aware of one of two things that you might want to keep an eye on. Okay. So back to the beginning, we said that the first thing that we wanted to have a look at is this UcamX Workflow Edition graphics editor. As it states here, it's the all-round workhorse for solving issues with the incoming data. Now, over the past years, we have done our very best, and we are still doing so, to try and get you as much automation as possible. But sometimes, just every now and then, the data in the archive is simply not good enough or too incomplete for an automation to work the full 100%. In order to overcome this, historically, we have had this so-called job editor, which most of you probably know. It's a lightweight editor where you would have a number of different modules, And those modules would just help you get through the most basic of problems. Like in the case of a layer editor, you would be able to rearrange the stackup if the stackup was not interpreted correctly, or there is a section with drill that will allow you to do some interventions on tools and plated and non-plated and whatnot. But that is, as we said, just the, some basic editing features that you have available right there, right from your Cockpit editor. With the UcamX Workflow Edition graphics editor, we basically go one step beyond. I have here in this queue from my cockpit a number of samples which I will hope to illustrate some of the possibilities of this feature. And the context that you should think of is that sometimes it's simply a data set will simply not have an outline, or the outline is basically to be composed from different layers in a job, and the automation isn't capable of grabbing these pieces together and build a correct 100% correct outline for the job. Similarly, we see that it happens less and less often, but sometimes there is still this thing with the registration of layers, where basically one layer will not line up with the other because the CAD system has output it in different coordinate systems or whatever. Now, there is automatic layer registration capabilities in Integr8tor, as you know, but sometimes you have these very low info layers where it's hardly anything to be recognized, which appears in another layer to get the registration right, or even worse, it might be ambiguous. The things that can be recognized in a layer could be positioned in a variety of different other ways on the other layer. So the registration, the layer registration in that case is unclear and will probably fail in the automatic mode. That's the second case where, for instance, today, the traditional job editor will not give you any possibilities to do this correction or to do this intervention online. What would happen today is you would maybe take this archive to the CAM department, talk to the guy in CAM, ask him to do blah, 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 and then he has no time and he has to set aside his own work and then do something on your archive, correct it, make the archive again, and then you go back to your integrator, which is a bit, well, cumbersome to say the least, and it doesn't help getting you the quotation back to your customer in time. And basically, this sort of context is the context where the UcamX Workflow Edition graphics editor comes in. Because what it will do is, as you will see in a minute, in my cockpit, I have here this function called toUcam. And if I would select one of these jobs here in my list, and I would do toUcam, then what you would see is that the job is now taken from Cockpit and is loaded live, really basically into this workflow edition UcamX software. Now, for those of you who are users of both Integr8tor and UcamX, you will recognize this as, of course, a UcamX, which is our fully fledged CAM software. But via a number of interventions, we use a special license set, a special or a reduced or a limited set of license keys. What we offer is a reduced version of the UcamX CAM package, really. Yeah, so just the stuff that you need to help Integr8tor in case it doesn't sort out a job fully automatically. So many of you may know this editor from seeing it, or maybe even from using it. The purpose of this video is not that I give you a full training on all these functions that we have in here. That will be something that will do or can be done in a different way. What I would just like to show you here is, as I said, a number of the things that it can do for you. Now this, if we would go back, if we would go back to the cockpit, this would be a job where you'd see everything would be okay, in the sense that it has QED with image data ready. But if you look at the bottom part here in the to-dos or in the critical remarks, we are being informed that it's not possible to create an auto-clean job. Auto-clean job is basically the job that Integr8tor would trim to fit the needs of the CAM people. So to give the CAM people a head start, not starting from the same archive again, but already an optimized set with DPF layers and the registration and the stackup and blah, blah, blah. All of these things. So for some reason, this job was unable to, or the system rather, was unable to output the clean version of this job. And as it happens, in many cases, if that happens, this is due to the fact that, helpful as the CAD system might have been, it has been putting in what we would call a shadow outline into one of these copper layers. Yeah, you see here this line that I will select it from the select chain. This line that goes all the way around the board is probably a way that the CAD system was trying to say that this is really the board size, and this is something that you could use as the outline. Okay, so that's fair enough. That's very helpful indeed. Apart from one thing, which is what you see down here, it's that this shadow outline is now basically touching upon a copper pad, which is drilled, which is plated, so which is what we call functional copper. Yeah. And what will happen at some point is during auto clean, we will want to remove this shadow outline in the copper layer. But because it is touching functional copper, there is some sort of security mechanism in the system that will say, this may not be a good idea just to do this automatically. And it will also see that the netlist would change the netlist that the system built itself from the job to start with. This taking this netlist as a reference and then do the removal of the shadow outline, that would produce actually a difference in the netlist. And that would be an extra reason for the system to say, oh, no can do. This is something that we will want to leave into the capable hands of a human. So here I am. Basically, I have all the data for my QED for this job, but I don't have the clean job version. So what I could do now with this workflow edition editor is I would just go into the copper layers, top layer, same thing on the bottom layer, probably select, there's a multitude of selection possibilities with windows in and crossing, select chain, reverse, by aperture, God knows what. But the most convenient one in this case is like with select chain. I select the shadow outline in the second layer. I would press the delete button on the keyboard. Sorry, you didn't see that, but that's what I did. And that would make the shadow outlines go away. And really what I would do now is, let's see, there was nothing on this one. No, that's is okay. Really the only thing I would need to do is just say job save, and that would take the job back to Integr8tor, as it were. Integr8tor would take this as some sort of sacred information. It knows it has gone to the workflow editor, and whatever comes back from the workflow editor is considered to be good and optimal. So if all goes well and I go out here, what we should see is that this job, if we do a refresh, it will now start again in through the auto analysis with the modified data that I've given it, and then it will continue with the rest. So that's one example. I have maybe another one here. That's a nice one too. I'll take this second one in my UcamX. And this is really a case where we have the thing that I mentioned earlier, the misregistration of a number of layers, or in this case, I think it's only one. So there too, there is a number of functions in this graphics editor that will allow you really very easily to get on top of things. If I go here and I bring the outer layer in blue and I put the legend, for instance, in red, you would see that this legend layer for some reason is way off the rest of the data. And then really the only thing it takes, well, let's just have a look if that's the only one involved. So this is the paste layer is okay, the solder mask is okay, the copper layers themselves amongst them are okay. This one seems to be fine, this one is okay. Even the outline has worked. We have a drill drawing, which is basically of no interest for this particular exercise. And we have a drill layer, which is also in register with the rest. So really, it is only this legend layer for topside, which is causing a bit of a headache. So in this case, we have this these functions here, which allow me to transform or to modify the DPF data on the layers, be it a selective part of the data or the entire data from this layer. And what I would need to do now basically is just using the move function and the any direction option. I can just grab this and drop it somewhere close to where I want it to be, not too close. Then maybe make a zoom. And now look, when I go to this snap menu here, I have an option which is called snap to point. And when I now would take the same move function any direction and I would get close to any of these objects on these layers, if I go here, the system will automatically jump to where you see the white cross here, which is the starting point of the vector. And now if I would take the data there and I would bring it on top of the blue one, it would do the same snapping on the blue one. So in this way, I have a very easy and convenient way to put the two layers on top of each other just by finding one coordinate which I know should be identical in the two layers. Yeah. Now, other than that, you see that on this particular job, for some reason in the outer layer there is also, I don't know, a remnant of something that was supposed to sit around it. So you could go and again with the same select chain, you could remove this from the data, or you could also wonder this outline again, this edge, the shadow outline, maybe I should remove it from here as well, or these ones which typically probably they are markers for some sort of NPTH holes, which are basically not part of the archive. But so at this point you could decide to do any other thing that you liked on this job, on this data, but at least whatever you do, you have also resolved this initial problem where we had the misregistration of these layers. Well, there's no need to save this one. I'll just get out of here. And then to give you a third example of what would be possible with this module is I will go to this one here, and this one is a job where you see from the image here, the system has misjudged the outline because the outline in one of the layers was almost there, but it wasn't exactly there, and then it was, or the software was misled into choosing a route. If we look at, sorry, the profile layer here, let's switch off any of these other layers. This is the profile layer, so it's really sort of started off well, and at some point then it took the wrong turning and it ended up going back here, and that is probably because it found something very similar in this drawing layer. Okay, so bad luck, no problem. What we do is we put, for instance, our profile layer in red. We put one of the, sorry, we put this one, for instance, on the background in a different color. And now what we can do, I hope it's been a long time since I last did this, but I'll try anyway. What I will do is I'll just make a very small circle aperture. Let's make this, what, come on. 50 micron, yeah, why not 50 micron. And then again, I will be using my snap function, snap to point. And with this set up, what I will do is I will now go to my edit toolbox and I will pick up the draw function. And again, taking advantage of this snapping, I can now start drawing in my profile layer with the help of this document layer or the drawing that I have in the background. I make a draw here. I could make a zoom in before I move on to the next and say, well, then we want to go from here to up there. I could maybe even go to skeleton. I could go to this one. Okay. Then I would do the same thing, but for this top section. As you can see, this is one of the reasons why it wasn't working out as well, because these lines, they are not really connected. So what we will do is we will go from here and then we will jump to this one and we will want to make it over here. And then the last one that we want to do is, from somewhere here. This one wasn't even closed, as you can see. From somewhere over here, we go down, and that brings us basically more or less to the point where we started. Okay, so those would be 1, 2, 3, 4 straight lines, and then I have also construction functions to make arcs. And if I pick my arc function, one of the variants by which or with which I can make an arc is with 3 points, and then I just click on here. I click on any arbitrary point on the arc. I go up here, and that gives me the arc that I wanted, and I do the same thing up here. I say, give me the arc 3-point function. I click on this one. I pick any one here, and I do up to there. I double click to confirm. And basically, if I now switch off the background layer that I was using, and I would be switching off the snap modus and get out of the drawing functionality, I could now basically see that by clicking on this one line, I have now selected the complete chain, which would mean that basically the form or the shape that I have just made is eligible to be turned into a contour aperture rather than a circle aperture. And once I turn it into contour, it will describe the surface of my board outline. Yeah. So if I would compare this to the other layers, I would now have the outline that I really wanted for this job. Again, I could save this, but I mean, this is just for the purpose of some of these functions in the editor. So we will quit out of here without anything special. Okay, so as we said, with this tool, there's quite a number of things that you can do. I have, if everything goes well, I have a document here which lists some of the functionality that we provide with this tool. PP1 just means that it's not multi-core, because for this type of job, multi-core wouldn't make sense. So there's nothing to gain from there. As you can see, we would be offering in this tool, you would also be offered the possibility to read in data, the same data formats that come with your integrator system. And so for the odd case where people would still provide a job with a Gerber list, so really old style Gerber with an aperture list, sorry, you would be in a position, if we don't recognize the aperture list automatically in the integrator automation, you would have a possibility to read in this data set from here, from scratch. Basically, just do the input yourself, recognize the aperture yourself using a special tool that we have in there. Read this in from here and then give the job to integrator, and it will process it from that point on. It will take the data and the stack up that you have made and given it, and it will process it for the remainder of the or it will process it in the remainder of the integration. Drill formats, data formats, you would have possibilities with the job editor, which was this little thing with these layers that we were seeing a minute ago. Possibilities there to add layers, for instance. A typical case is if you would have a board with selective gold finish and you would want to know for your quotation what the surface of the gold finish area is. What you could do is you could go into this workflow edition editor. You could create an extra layer to the job, which comes from the archive. You could add your own layer, and in that layer you can make some area, just the same way that I made the outline a minute ago. You could make a layer with an area, and in that area, or that area, sorry, would designate the area where you would have selective gold, or where you would have carbon, or if you need a peel-off mask that doesn't belong to the incoming archive. That's all stuff that you can do from there. We have seen cases where, oh yes, in the context of old style Gerber, if you have full copper layers, in the old style tradition, a full copper signal layer, for instance, would be provided as 3 or could be provided as 3 Gerber layers. And then you had to change the polarity of one of these 3 and then merge it in negative and blow it up to make the clearances inside the copper background. And in these clearances, you would then merge the real signal. So that would be typically an old school Gerber would come in as 3 different layers, Gerber layers, which basically represent physically one copper layer. Yeah. So this hocus pocus of bringing the correct layers together into one copper layer, that would be a function of a merge. In other cases, we've seen for one layer, pads and tracks sitting on different layers, which is of course of no use for integrators. So there too, using the merge function, you could first build the correct copper layer and take it from there. There's things that will allow you to take data from one layer and paste it onto another layer with cut, copy, and paste. As you've seen me do it, there were things that we could delete and select. There is copper count information if you want to have an interactive copper count quickly. You can do image compare if you want to compare a certain revision of the data with maybe a job that the customer sent you before, and he says, well, it's just the same as the one from last time, apart from da. Then an image compare function is available to certify that indeed it is what your customer claims it is. The enhanced construction editor is what you saw me use to do the outline. There is registration for layers and so on and so forth. Yeah. So as we said, it's quite an extensive toolbox, and we believe that you will find it very useful in solving any of these issues that arise with the incoming data. Now, how do you get hold of it? There's basically 2 things that you need to do. First of all, you need the workflow editor software, and that is basically the regular UCAM installer. So you can go onto your regular FTP download site and not only grab the integrator installer, you can also find there the UcamX installer. And that is the one that you download and you practically install UcamX on any client where you want to use this tool. Yeah, so typically on all the computers where you have the cockpit running and where you want to do this. Other than that, so once the software is in place, you just give a yell to either support or our license department, because then we will extend your license file with the required licenses in order to let you use the UcamX software in its workflow edition mode. Yeah? And that will make sure, for instance, that if you're on a combined system that has CAM functionality, a full-blown CAM system, and the workflow edition editor, that the 2 systems do not steal licenses away from each other. Yeah, so just give us a shout. We will update your license file, and then after installing that, you will have this tool making use of the proper licenses without, as we said, running into the situation where we steal away CAM functionality. This option comes free of charge for maintenance customers and is part of your installation for as long as your maintenance runs. So there is no extra cost involved. And as we said, it would be a shame not to use it or miss out on the opportunity. So please have a look at it. And if there is any issues with installing or doing, then just contact the help desk and they will be happy to help out. All right. I think that's what I wanted to tell you about the workflow edition. Then let's move on to have a look at the QED report. And for that, what we see here is we have added an anomalies section, a minimum BGA size, a minimum solder mask opening, a legend to pad clearance analysis. And if we move on to the next slide, there is also some rearrangements that we have done for the header summary section. Okay. Starting with the first one, I have here a job, or maybe even 2 jobs, where we have a reason to have a look at the anomalies. So the job is processed. I go to my QED, Maybe I can double click it to have it full size. First of all, the anomaly section is something that you want to put yourself onto your existing QED PDF report. And the way to do this is you go into preferences, you go to your output QED report PDF. And in my case, it's already sitting here in the section visible. So it is part of my QED PDF report. But if this is the first time around, you will find anomalies probably sitting in the right-hand side. And what you do is you just drag and drop it to the left and you place it where you want it to appear on your PDF report. So right after the summary or right after the copper layers or whatever. So once you have done that, what it will do is two things, or what you will see is two things. First of all, in the summary general section, there is an entry which is added, anomalies, and it's a Boolean. It will either state yes or no, there are anomalies, or there are no anomalies. And in this case, we have a yes. So if I would go to, maybe I can do this with a search. Yes, I can do with a search. Anomaly. This is the first occurrence, and if we go further down, we see here this is the report where it then states what it thinks is not quite right. And really, the anomaly section have nothing to do with a value which is maybe too high or too low, nothing of that kind. What goes into anomaly is things that we think are basically incorrect, wrong. Yeah. So holes, some holes of plated drill tool number 4 have no ring at the end of the span in, and then the name of the drill sequence, DRL in this case. Plated holes in 99.99% of the cases are supposed to have annular ring on the from and the to layer, and if the system detects something like this, it will basically find this very, very unusual and make a note of this in the anomalies section. Oh, by the way, forgot to mention while I was up here, we also have provisions in conditional formatting rules to make this cell go red. So we can say if there are anomalies, yes, then put this line in red so that really at the blink of an eye, you can see that something is a bit off maybe there. The same goes, by the way, which is new for this version, the same goes for castellated. So castellated is also, if you have castellated boards, there is also possibilities to have this flagged in red now in your QED report so that you can see this immediately if you want to highlight it. This was my first example. I thought I had a second one in there. Let's see, where was it? Was it this one? Yes. This one is a case, if we go to the QED report again, it will first state anomalies. Yes, there are. Here we are, and if we again go for the find no ma, that should do it. There we go, there we go. In this case, we have a case of things that we believe are NPTH holes that are hitting functional copper. So that too is something that is really something that should not be off. I mean, we have sometimes NPTH holes that hit on a copper pad in a copper layer, just an isolated copper pad, which has no function at all. But in this case, it is something different. If we look at the bottom, you see these big black holes are all NPTH holes. And if we would take the data, you would see that indeed they actually bite into this fat traces here. So this is one of the other cases where anomaly will put up a flag and say this is really something that you want to have a look at and see what needs to be done. Yeah. Excuse me. The anomaly section, so extension to the QED, provided that you have put it in from preferences. We said that there was also something with BGA, but for that we need a job where we have some BGAs on there, so that might be one that we could have a look at here. What we have done is you will remember the section where we talk about this here, the SMD including BGA, where we have the smallest pad, the pitch of the pad, whether they are solder masked defined or not. As you can see, we have slightly reworked this section, SMD including BGA still exists. It's from the original perspective. Sorry. What you will find here now is that we have made the split SMD with BGAs included, and then a number of these statistics apart account where the BGAs are left out. So this is purely surface mount device pads that you would see here. And then this section on the right hand side would talk about BGA items alone. So the number of pads here, and it's here where you will see that the minimum pad size has been added to this section for to flag or to bring out the smallest SMD size. While we are at it, I think just below, yes, in the solder mask, there's also some addition to the solder mask analysis, in the sense that we will also now report the minimum mask opening to probably help you on a decision what sort of technique or technology, the way that you want to apply your solder mask, you will use. Yeah. And as long as we are at it, I just want to show you something else which has to do with legend, I thought it was, where there was also, yeah, we will now also report individually a clearance between legend and any, what you could say, non-via pad. Yeah, so we will take the legend layer and look what the clearance, what the minimum clearance is towards the nearest either component pad or SMD pad or BGA pad. We assume that it is, under circumstances, sometimes allowed to have ink, legend ink, on via pads. So that's why we leave out the via pads from this analysis, and we will purely concentrate on component SMD or BGA. Yeah. Then to finish off this quick tour in the quick tour of the QED, let's go back to the very beginning because we have been rearranging bits and pieces here too, moving stuff that was here to other sections, and probably the easiest way to do this is I go back to this document that I had before, and where we can now see I have made a summary of old style, so the previous version of software, how it would come out, and then the August 2020. Nothing different in the first column. So everything that used to be there is still there, and in the same way and order. The things that you will see different is in the second column. Well, first of all, we have these anomalies that we were talking about a minute ago. The surface finish aspect ratio are still there. Drilled SMD pads, used to be called drilled SMD pads, has been renamed, simply renamed to via in pad, because that appears to be the common terminology to refer to this technology. The pressing stages are there. The electrical test single-sided is moved to the electrical test section of the QED report. And instead of that, we have now here the number of testable points, then the SMDs on top and bottom, then the BGAs on top and bottom. The number of nets also has been moved to the electrical test section, so that really your summary here at the beginning of your QED report in the right-hand side looks somewhat different, and we hope to have given you more relevant job characteristics here and moved out a number of the less common one or less interesting ones to their relevant section. So nothing has disappeared, everything is still there, but you may just find it in a different place. Good. So far for the extensions on the QED. If we go back to our tour guide here, as it were, we have been talking about this, the BGA. We have been looking at the rearrangements. In terms of outline creation, you see a note here that we will now take into account corner marks. In some cases, you will find very small items or dots or in the four corners of the boards. And this August 2020 release is basically a first version that will also try and spot these things if it finds no other means to come to a good outline. So you've seen, if you think back of the workflow editor module, the UcamX that I was showing at the beginning of this presentation, you would have an interactive tool that would help you very easily to make an outline based of these 4 corner marks. Again, you would put one layer in blue on the background, and then you would start drawing the way that you saw me do it. But above that, there is also automatic software in place now within Integr8tor that will try and grab these corner marks or points and create the outline automatically for you, so that you don't even have to go into the workflow editor. Drill span recognition is something that many of you have come back to us saying that with the more complex builds and the jobs that you get where there is increased appearance of blind and buried layers, or this any layer HDI technology, we have been working on putting more comprehensive rules in place that will pick up the drill files and define the span for you automatically. So the span, so being defining the start layer, the start copper layer of the drill, and the finish copper layer for that drill program. Yeah. So there too, you should see a considerable improvement. Having said that, if you happen to stumble upon a case where we do not pick this up correctly yet, just feel free to forward it to our support department. We will be happy to look into it and extend the logic that we have in there right now for the next versions. This version, August version 2020, also features new versions or completely new algorithms for RegionMaker and PadMaker. Now, basically, those are 2 things behind the scenes. So there is not much visible that you have from there. But what it does, RegionMaker is basically finding painted areas and will turn them into contours. Contours are important for the system to discriminate them from like signals and paths. They are one of the basic 3 object types that we have in there. And for this version, we have developed a completely new algorithm, both for finding painted data and turning it into contours, as well as for finding paths, painted paths, and turn them into real flashed path. And the thing is that with this new constellation, the 2 sort of interact with each other. From the results that we have seen, we are actually quite happy to see that a number of problem cases that you, again, as users had been using before, come out clean now with actually a very accurate result the way that you would want it. This RegionMaker and PadMaker is also something that you would find in your UcamX, either the full CAM or the workflow edition. And the result of it would be something that you would see in the clean job output in Integr8tor. Yeah? So the clean job export that you have in Integr8tor is basically the data set where RegionMaker would have converted all of these painted areas into regions and where all the flashes are available the way they are meant to be. So if this is not yet an option of your Integr8tor installation, I mean the auto clean and the clean job generation, just give it a thought and maybe just ask for a trial license, because it can do so much for you and it can make life so much easier for the people that come after you if the quotation becomes an order. So it's really, really something that you should give a thought and certainly worth exploring. The Gerber job file inputs. The Gerber job file, as you may remember, was launched, I think it's 2 years back now, and it's basically a file format which is part of the Gerber constellation. UcamX, as you know, is owner of the Gerber format, and with the Gerber job input, we have a mechanism where it is possible to basically add job characteristics or feed job characteristics, PCB characteristics, to Integr8tor in an automatic way. We had that before. We have similar ways for doing this from the web page, and we have the input form. But the whole new thing with the Gerber job file is that the Gerber job file is more and more often generated by CAD vendors or CAD programs. So if you happen to receive Gerber data that comes from KiCad, for instance, or from Eagle, we hear that Altium is busy implementing the Gerber job file output, and a number of other ones as well. So you may see a growing number of Gerber job files in the data archives. And we have one here, for instance, for this particular case. If I go and click on it in the job list, it's basically a JSON syntax style file. It has a syntax description, what can go in there, what should not go in there, the way it's supposed to be formatted, that sort of thing. And what the nice thing is, if that is part of your archive of the incoming data, the Gerber files that come in, and there would also be a Gerber job file in there, what it basically can do for you is it can grab your surface finish from there, it can grab your layer thicknesses from there, it can get your type of solder mask, grab it from there, and do all these things that you normally do from interactive job submit. Which is of course a very nice thing to have. If you just allow me at this point, I would just make a small sidestep to the Gerber Job Editor. Gerber Job Editor is a graphic application that you can download free of charge from the UcamX website. It's, well, you see it here. It's basically something that will allow you to either look at the contents of a Gerber job file. So what I've done here is I grabbed one of these Gerber job files on my desktop. And when I drop it in there, it will basically read this JSON file that we were just looking at and represent it to me in a graphical way. So here you would have, for instance, the Gerber job file has potential to carry information about the stackup, the thickness of the copper, the dielectric spacing between copper layers, and so on and so forth, the board thickness, the number of layers. Other things as well, as you can see, the ones that are gray in this particular case means that they were not part of the Gerber job file that I have dropped in. So a Gerber job file can have many things in there, but can also be limited to just a few basic properties that it describes about the job. And whatever it is, I mean, it's definitely better than doing everything by hand. So this tool can also be made available to your customers, by the way. So if you want to hint them at this possibility, feel free to refer them to the UcamX website and tell them about the Gerber job file. You will also find the Gerber job file specification in the same downloads area over there. Yeah. So really there is, I mean, other than that, what you see is if the solder mask stated blue here and the legend white and the number of layers and the board thickness was 1.6, then basically what you would see in the images here, after it's been processed, it has been doing exactly what the Gerber job file told it to be. Or if you go to modify job, you would find a number of these parameters. If you care to organize them, you would find a number of these parameters here in the job submit menu, which is, as I said, it's nice. It helps the automation definitely, again, one step forward. The other thing that I had on my list here was 2 items for the clean job output. We have something with 0 size aperture and set origin. And for that too, I have here 1 or 2 jobs, I believe. Let's see, where was it? It's the top one. Yep. CAD systems have sometimes, I was talking about shadow outlines previously, a copy of the outline that goes into the copper layers. Now, in the case that we saw before, it was actually doing this with some circle aperture with a given size. Sometimes CAD systems will output this information with a 0 size aperture. Now, a couple of releases ago from Integr8tor, we added the possibility that at least on the images that we produce here, we will do a hairline. We will use a hairline pen, as it were, to represent zero size apertures. So you see the one that goes around the edge here, and then there is these two in the middle here where there's NPTH holes going through. So on the images you already had this, but if I would take this job, for instance, and I would again take it to my to UCam workflow editor, then what you would see is this layer validation box. Because by definition, a zero size aperture isn't visible. We have built in UCam and in related products, we have built in this check that when you load in DPF files and they contain zero size apertures, that you will get advised, because otherwise at first look, I mean, this top copper layer couldn't look less suspicious. But if you look, for instance, in skeleton, or if you do a select all, then you would see that a number of these items are in here. And if I would go and look into my aperture list, I would see that indeed this first aperture in this list is an aperture with size 0, which is used for doing all this hocus pocus. Now, this thing typically is stuff that you would like to get rid of, certainly while in CAM. It doesn't bother you too much for quotation purposes. But if, again, we think about auto clean and a clean job and the link towards CAM and getting a head start there, it's stuff that you could easily remove from the data just by adding. I'm quickly going to my system setup here. Maybe you are familiar with these users preferences from Integr8tor, and that's the area where you can set a number of these auto clean options. And in this section, you have now a possibility or a number of keys that will talk about clean zero size apertures. Yeah, there is one which is called clean zero size apertures on all, which will basically tell the software in whatever layer you come across a zero size aperture, just get rid of it at the time that you do the clean job output. Yeah, so that's one variant. We have had cases where people wanted to keep, for instance, the one which represents the outline and only want to get rid of the ones that you saw here, which represent the location of the MPTH holes. And then there is a separate filter for that, where you could say, well, just check out the ones that corresponds with the non-plated holes, if there are any. Yeah. So you set this up. There are then some margin values to specify the accuracy or how much smaller or bigger this area here could be compared to the non-plated, but that's all for the people from the help desk if you need more information on that. But once this key has been set and you make a clean job output, so in this case, we were still seeing all of these apertures. I'm just going out of my workflow editor here. This is job ID 2417. So if you bear with me, I will go to in here. I believe I am in 2414. I would now go to 2417. I take a clean job. I have a UCam job there as well. So this is the output I was talking about earlier, one of the exports that the system can do for you to give your colleagues in CAM a bit of a happy way to start the day. If I would take the same job from the clean job export, you would now see, if I take this aperture list, that everything has gone. If I select all, the one around the edge has gone, the ones in here have disappeared, so nothing there. Also, the warning messages at loading time has disappeared. So this data, again, is of a somewhat higher grade than what the original archive was giving us. In the same context, that may also be a good one to have a look at. No, we'll take this one. At the same time, what we have done is many of you use the bottom left of the PCB as the origin, the data, the origin of the data where they want to locate the board. So what we have also done is, if I still have this users preferences open, no, I have the directory, but let me quickly go back to it. If I take this one into Notepad, you will find another one which is called Move Job to Origin. which in my case is set to true. And what that will do is the following. If I go here and take this job and I have a look at it into UCAM, that would be more or less the data that corresponds to the way it was organized and set in the incoming archive, so the Gerber files. And if you look at that, you will find, or you will see with me, that basically the 0 point of the data is here and that the board is located somewhere in the first quadrant, a little bit off. If I take the profile here, the profile has rounded edges and it's X dimension away from the 0 point. Now, if I would close this, quit, no saving needed, go away. And I would now take this 2414 in my regular UCAM and I would take the clean job output from it. This would be my 217. This would be my what did we say? 2114? Yes, 2114. The clean one, and then go here. You would see that as a consequence of this new preference that has been set, the job, wherever it was located in the original archive, will now be repositioned in such a way that the bottom left-hand corner of the profile, which is this one, now coincides with the 0 point. So because of the rounded corner, of course, what you should do is you imagine you extend this line all the way down here, and you extend imaginary, in your imagination, you extend this line all the way here, and where the two cross, this is basically the bounding box around the outline. This is where the 0 point will be positioned. So again, for the guys down the road in the CAM department, it's one of these things that they typically do in processing the CAM job. It's something that they don't have to bother about anymore. 0 apertures have gone, job has been relocated to a 0 point bottom left, which is very helpful and nice. Right, let's go back to our tour guide, getting on to the part where we wanted to look at something visible still, these cockpit extensions. Let's do the solder marks types and finishes first. They go quite easily. If I go to submit job, you have these surface finishes here, and you will see that compared to your previous versions, there's a whole bunch of them that have been added to support you with latest manufacturing techniques. And the same goes with solder masks, colors. We have added a few. So there too, we hope that you will find these helpful and that they will help you make more accurate quotations. The other one that I would like to show is this one here at the top. We had, where is it? Here it is, high security. High security, the context for this is there is a selective number of very large companies out there who place high value on intellectual property. And when they have a board or when they make projects, it has come to the point, as we hear, that if I am a PCB manufacturer and I want to produce one of these boards for such a customer, that this end customer of mine is going to designate and train a number of my people, my employees in, for instance, CAM, and that only those people are allowed to look at the data, to view the data, to work on the data. Yeah. So some sort of, well, you could call it for your eyes only. Yeah. There is, if a data from, I don't know, I'm inventing here, if a data from Airbus or Boeing comes in and it's related to that project, in my CAM department, I have only these 3 people who are trained or accredited or screened or whatever you want to call it, to work on this data. And the other 5 people, or all the other people running around here in the company, basically have no business in looking or dealing with this data. That's where the high security option comes in. So if I would go to my list of jobs here and I would do filter off, what would happen is at the time I submit job and I register or I click this option high security, what will happen is the system, as you know, always registers the user, the owner of this job, yeah. So who has launched this job into Integr8tor, basically, yeah. And that is one of the columns that you can see in Cockpit. You see here by owner, as I'm most of the time logged in as admin. All of these owners would be admin, but I do have a few where I have something different. If I filter on demo, you will see here that there is also a user demo on this system, as well as a user guest. You will find this in your preferences. If you're looking for this, there is somewhere the users here where you will find the admin, the guest, and the demo. So if you have a setup on your integrator system that has multiple users, you can actually use this high security option to make sure that the right people can look at the data. And what we will do basically is two things. At the time of job submit, with this option ticked on, you will have this extra column here in the beginning, which is called HS, high security. And if a job has been submitted with the high security option on, it will have this little lock showing in front of it. And that would mean that basically only the owner of this job has access and is capable of looking at this data. Only the owner of the job, or second possibility, somebody who has administrative privilege. So now, as I'm logged in as administrator in this system, I will be able to see and to access any job in this system. But if you would bear with me, this job was owned by demo. If you bear with me and I go out of this cockpit, I would return to this cockpit, but now as a user guest, yeah, guest which does not have administrative privileges, and guest who is not the owner either of the job. Then what you would see is that when I come back here and I go into this list and I would filter onto the same demo, yeah, me as being guest and not being the owner of this job, as it was submitted with high security option, it's basically grayed out. The cockpit will remain dumb. It will not show any file list, not show any pictures. I won't have access to any of these functions here, which could get me to the job. The other jobs, which are also owned by demo, there I do have this access because these two jobs were not submitted with the high security option switched on. Yeah. So that is for those of you who are dealing with these requests from your end customers, that you have only a limited number of people looking at certain jobs and certain data. Administrative users, by the way, are always in a position not only to, maybe I should go out of here, yes, and we come back as admin. They are also capable of changing the owner of a job, yeah. So the one that we saw before was submitted as demo, but as an admin user, let's go back as admin. There you go. And I would filter on the same owner demo. It's not grayed out, so as an admin I have access, and if I go to modify job, that's the reason why it has been added here. In modify job as an administrator, I can now assign it to somebody else, yeah? So if user demo were absent for the next 3 days and we need to make sure that somebody else can continue on this data or work on this data, I, as an administrator, could either take care of it myself and do the work that needs to be done, or I could change the owner of the job to guest. And at that point, the person with login guest would have gained access to this job, and he would then be able to do whatever needs to be done. Yeah. So the high security option in Cockpit. I think that has taken us through most of what I wanted to tell you, apart from this last item. As I said, there's quite a few code changes and fixes, and we're not going to go all every one of them, but I do want to point out these two. In this 2020.08 release, we have moved from LibreOffice 5 to LibreOffice 6. LibreOffice is basically a third-party application that we have under the hood that we use to generate documentation files, all sorts. Now, this move from LibreOffice 5 to 6 is something that, I mean, we do not do out of free will. These programs evolve, and at some point you need to change along with it. And the change from version 5 to version 6 is basically also a change from 32-bit to 64-bit. Yeah, and as a result of this, during the upgrade of your integrator software, there will be a reinstallation of LibreOffice, and it will be, because it's a 64-bit application, it will be installed in a new directory. It is going to go to C program files, whereas the previous version would go to C program files x68. Yeah. So the new version will be installed there, but then you just have to remember that in your cockpit, in your preference, we have this option where you specify the folder to the LibreOffice application. And I just wanted to point out that you should not forget to update this key. If we had a look at the cockpit settings, it would be, you can find it under, where is it, paths, I believe. Yes, paths, it is. Here you see Open Office folder. So in your current situation, it might still refer to C program files x86 LibreOffice, and then I think there was even a version name in the previous version specified, version LibreOffice 5 or something like this. So that after upgrading your integrator version, that should change to C program files LibreOffice as such. The second thing is a similar sort of situation. The Jdom application. Jdom is also a third-party application that we use inside of Integrator to do a whole bunch of things, basically to juggle around with XMLs. Yeah. We have moved in this version from Jdom 1 to Jdom 2. And for us, I mean, the standard application, that's okay. We have verified that everything worked and is correct. There's no problem there. But during initial tests, we've seen that in one or two cases, layer rename scripts that are basically something that you have as a user, because it's your own layer naming convention, in a limited number of cases, Jdom 1 may be used also for your layer rename script. Yeah, and we have had one or two cases where with the move from Jdom 1 to Jdom 2, a number of commands in the layer rename scripting were obsoleted and no longer valid. Yeah, so it could be, it's not likely, but there is a chance that after upgrading, you might find an issue with your layer rename script, that it doesn't work anymore, and then it's probably to do with this Jdom upgrade from 1 to 2. So what you do in that case, or even beforehand, feel free to let us have a copy of your layer rename script and send it to our support people. They will be happy to install it on their latest version of Integrator, run a job through, and see that everything works as expected. And if it turns out that it doesn't work as expected, that there is the rare case where there would be an issue, then the colleagues at the support desk will be happy to just modify the rename script very quickly, send it back to you, and you will be all set. All right. Good. I think that's it for now. As we said, the version is available on FTP. Feel free to download it. We hope you will enjoy it, and we look forward to any feedback you may have. Thank you for watching this video. Enjoy, and above all, stay healthy. Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.